Hey guys, and welcome. This is Lowman02, getting ready to record a deck tech and some gameplay of the deck you have in front of you, which is a black-white mid-range, historically known as DeadGuy AO, and that moniker still sticks to some extent, as I've seen some black-white decks in Legacy and Modern, given they're more fringe playable. As I would say this deck is in Old School 93-94, which is the format that we're playing it in. We're playing under EC rules with this deck, however, I ported it over from Legacy, so it was a Singleton Strip Mine build, and it still is in this rendition, and that may or may not be correct, given the pretty hefty mana requirements of the deck. It is a Dark Ritual deck, which can allow it to, one, get a Seer Angel or Armageddon down early, or resolve a turn 1 Hypnotic Spectre. So the deck is a quintessential mid-range deck in this format, which I think tends to be a more risky place to be in the format, in 93-94, because I tend to think that aggro, or control prison, but prison really just being an archetype of control, tend to be the best in this format just because they have a greater depth of playables. But this deck certainly can present relatively fast clocks. One of the benefits of playing this specific deck is that you only have 4 cards that die to City in a Bottle, which tends to knock out the best threats in the format. You're also able to play Meekstone because either your creatures that are over 4 toughness do not tap, or they're just all tiny, they're like Hypnotic Spectre that just gains value, or Thunder Spirit, which is a fine card in of its own right. All of them also fly, which allows you to play Moat, which is also kind of a benefit to the deck. I think the deck's pretty sweet, so it plays the best removal suite. Like, white is maybe... It's tough. Like, white and blue are probably the 2 best colors in this format. I mean, it's hard to say what a best color is, but white just adds so much flexibility to a deck and, what you're able to beat. Like, Disenchant is the best removal in this format. I'll go ahead and say it. I don't think it's the most powerful. I think Swords to Plowshares is more powerful. I think Chaos Orb is more powerful, but the range of what Disenchant can hit and not having to flip it for one to actually have its effect is extremely powerful in this format. And the card, shined for many, many years after, 93, 94 Magic was, had come and gone. Even having Disenchants be pretty ubiquitous in control list up until, 98 or so. So, the first, 5 years of the game, Disenchant was not a card that was scoffed at. That said, so we have Swords to Plowshares, Disenchant. We do have a Miser's Land Tax, which I actually like in this style of deck. A lot of basic lands, and it's a way to accrue a lot of value. I don't want too many of those, but it's also very synergistic with Armageddon as well. So the mana is difficult in this deck because, we're playing a lot of basics, and we have, some triple black cards. So I like Dark Ritual in this, just to power out some of the Underworld Dreams to fight against some of the card advantage-based decks that use Brain Geyser, Ancestral Recall, etc., to drive their hand size up pretty large. Soul Ring just to get down a Moat or a Seer Angel a little bit earlier, or fuel Mind Twist. Balance, positional card. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's horrible to draw this card. But I think the upside of it is enough that if you start with it in your opener, or know you are going to draw into it, or can tutor into it and want to play with it, you can generally set up the board in a way that allows you to benefit very highly from it. Also, Divine Offering, just good for racing some of the artifact-style aggro lists. Dust to Dust, I like having one of these main, but I don't know. After the match that I'm going to show you, I was a little bit less impressed with some of my artifact removal. I think I just maybe have too much of it in the main deck, and wanted some other options there to include maybe just a third Seer Angel. A pretty standard DeadGuy AO like threat package, stuff that does not die to City in a Bottle and can live through that and also fly over a Moat. So Thunder Spirits, 4 of, Hypnotic Spectres, 4 of, and then some Underworld Dreams just to kind of, help supplement the clock and also fight against the card advantage decks that are going to be trying to Jame Day Tome or Library of Alexandria out. 3 Armageddons. I think I may want to go down to 2. I think Armageddon tends to be in a dubious spot in this format. It's either epic level good or it's kind of just 4 mana for nothing. So it's kind of one of the outs the deck has to sealing up an early advantage. But as you see, I don't know if it always, is the most beneficial, given the speed of some of the decks, the efficiency of them, and the vast amount of artifact mana in the format. Seer Angels, not many better threats than her in this format. I mean, there are more efficient threats that I would say are better because of their efficiency. But 5 mana for a 4/4 Vigilance Flyer, pretty great. Plus, look at that art. That's just iconic. I mean, they're still printing Seer Angel today, and it's still a limited bomb. Matter of fact, I just drafted it in Dominaria, and I was not upset having it in my deck. Mind Twist, yeah, just a busted restricted card in the format. Maze of Ith, I do like having one of these as an option. Meekstone works well with the deck. I only have 2 toughness attacker, or 2 power attackers, and I have only 2 power attackers plus Seer Angels, which this thing does not care about. 2 Spirit Links. I think they're just very good against some decks, especially decks that are playing a lot of Efreets, stuff like that, I don't really want to block. Even Ernies, like Erhnam Midrange, this is good to put on because they're stuck on the ground while all of my critters fly, and it can just randomly gain me some life or just force it to stay back. It's a 1-mana answer to possibly a 3 to 4 mana card. Circle of Protection, blue, black, and then 2 reds. Another City in a Bottle, because I think this card is one of the most powerful hosers in the format. 2 Preachers from the Dark. Generally speaking, allows you to steal like their 1 best threat if you can remove the others. Some more Dust to Dusts to help with the artifact aggro or just like heavy artifact matchup. 2 Nevinjarl's Disc. Never a bad idea to have 2 reset buttons in the sideboard of any deck. And this is a quintessential mid-range deck, so you can see it's got a lot of contrasting themes going on as far as removal and threats. It's sort of aggro, it's sort of control, it's mid-range. It offers its user maximum flexibility in decision or in their decision for which role to assume, beatdown or control in a matchup, at the loss of some coherence and focus in the deck. And like I said, I think the cards at this time make it a little more difficult to rapidly choose between assuming a control role or an aggro control. So sometimes decks like this, I think in this format, can lack coherence and can run into some issues of not allowing you to choose the role that you really want to play with the deck, given the conditions of the game state, which is obviously a challenge in mid-range even to this day, but I think the flexibility of cards overall has increased in Modern Magic. You look at a card like Kolaghan's Command, quintessential mid-range card, does whatever you want. It's a Swiss Army knife of a card. And contrast that with something like Dust to Dust. Dust to Dust does what it does better than Kolaghan's Command does for artifacts, but it doesn't do anything else. So you kind of can get trapped in some weird draws where you just have some deadweight cards, which is one thing that probably needs to be relooked with this build. That I think is still pretty cool, but it faces some challenges. So we'll get to the games. This first game I'm playing is MTG Stronghold, or Magic Stronghold. Plays turn 1 Curd Ape, so I'm thinking probably like some sort of a Arabian aggro, Rug aggro, or possibly Naya aggro deck. See a Mishra's Factory. At this point, I just go ahead and resolve the Soul Ring. I actually just disenchant their Mox Emerald to take them off Erhnam Jin mana. It looks like they're going to have Erhnam Jin mana the following turn anyways, and I figure this also supports my Armageddon plan. At this point, I go ahead and resolve a Hypnotic Spectre and blow up the Soul Ring to put them back down to 2 lands, so they cannot, again, get down an Erhnam Jin. They end up, I believe, having a Serendip Efreet. I draw very well and get a Swords to Plowshares. Crank in there for 2, putting them down to 23 and hitting a mana drain out of their hand. Probably not the best thing to have hit. I do go ahead and cast Armageddon here. I actually lose this race, but I am going to eat their entire hand. Fork, so they have some interesting cards in here. Fork and Mana Drain in a deck that appears to have Mishra's Factory is ambitious, but definitely doable. There's the Erhnam Jin that we were kind of worried about, though. And I think we're glad to have done the Armageddon here just to try to knock apart their options. I'm still attacking at this point because I figure, like any couple land drops and I can get the Seer down, I'll probably win. And I don't want to go too low, so I die to a bunch of bolts, but at the same time, I don't think I really want to trade Hypnotic Spectre before I can get board dominance. I draw very well and hit a Black Lotus here. Seer Angel, I think, is pretty close to game. My opponent attacks here. They're forced just to bolt because they're going to lose the bolt anyways. I don't block because I figure when they attack like that, they've probably got bolt, or they bluff me. And if they bluff me, too easy. I'm going to knock it out of their hand anyways next turn. Excuse me. Go ahead and take them off blue mana so they can't hit a Serendip Efreet or a Psionic Blast there. Put them to 1. They can no longer tap their City of Brass. They play an Efreet and die. This is a very cool card. I haven't seen it in a while. But it is essentially, it's a little expensive for a 3/3 flying comparative to its Jin brethren, or Efreet brethren, but it is a fireball in a lot of ways. It is one that everyone can activate, but it's kind of like a 3/3 that still flies and attacks, and also is kind of like Pestilence for flyers, which is not bad, because if you're the first person to get to attack with a 3/3 in the air and hit them, doing 2 damage to them extra a turn with your spare mana is very strong. So, we had that first game, and, we managed to get a little, I think, lucky with our hit. The Black Lotus was a big pickup. But I think we also set up in a pretty good way with the Geddon to ensure that our opponent didn't get any early threats down that we couldn't stop. Opponent has a pretty strong start here and has a lot of mana plus an early Curd Ape. Now, I'm kind of relying on this hand to pick up some black mana. So take a bit of a gamble on it. And opponent has If Bith Afreet again. And again, I'm really just hoping to hit black mana. I do actually... No, so I don't miss here. I hit this. I go ahead and disenchant here. I'm thinking in retrospect what I probably wanted to do is just Dark Ritual to spew value, dump the City in a Bottle down, and with the spare mana from the Dark Ritual, blow up the Sol Ring. And then I would have just taken the Mishra's Factory hit. As it stands, I really didn't want to blow up my only land there, my only second land there. So I take a very sizable hit for 5 off of the Curd Ape and the If Bith Afreet, which puts me at a very low life total here. I go ahead and attempt to disenchant. My opponent, unfortunately, in their last 2 cards has Avoid Fate, which allows the Mishra's Factory to avoid the fate that I had planned for it. And at this point, we have Swords to Plowshares, which, if we can manage to catch them out, then we should be able to get this factory. We get bolted, regrowth bolted. I go ahead and Swords to Plowshares, my own Hypnotic Spectre just to stay alive. Resolve the Thunder Spirit, which is pretty much on Mishra's Factory block duty, and my opponent drew into another Lightning Bolt. So they drew pretty well this game. I think there was a separate line we could have taken. So, I feel like this was probably a winnable game, given slightly different decision-making. We could say our opponent got lucky, and they did. They drew well with their burn. So they drew into, essentially, burn spell, because whether they had Regrowth in hand or Chain Lightning in hand, Regrowth can become a burn spell, right? Which forced me to spew off my STP, but immediately following that, they drew the burn, right? And they also had an answer to stop me from killing the Mishra's Factory and Avoid Fate. So, pretty solid sequence of cards to end off the game after getting some early damage in. Now, stepping back from that and saying, they got lucky, that's fine. It's probably accurate, but it doesn't matter. I think what's relevant in this game that we probably could have done better is we probably should have looked to, and given, we're putting some faith in our deck, to cast Dark Ritual on the turn that we solely disenchanted their Sol Ring. If we had cast Dark Ritual with our City of Brass, tapped our 1 white to disenchant the ring, and then played out the City in a Bottle, we would have been at 5 higher life, or a life total 5 points higher than we're at now, which would have actually disabled this line of play. Now, we're not psychics, and we don't know that we're going to draw a land on top of our deck, which we ended up doing. It was very nice. But I think in retrospect, there's always a right line, right? And whether the right line is intuitive or not, I think that probably was a better way to look at how we could play this hand to actually win this game right here. Because I think this was winnable, but it was tight, and they had the card support off the top of their deck that they needed to close it out here, and we just, we didn't. And frankly, from this position, I think they probably are advantaged with us at 2 life. Because you start looking at it what are we going to draw? More Thunder Spirits. Thunder Spirit is not a fast clock. Our best sequence that we could probably hope for is Black Lotus Armageddon, and then just that would probably lock them out of the game long enough that we could win it. With a City in a Bottle in play. But then they could also just draw Mishra's Factory and win from there as well. So game 3. This hand is not good, but I think it's keepable. It has all of the mana it could possibly need, and it has some decent removal. A Time Twister here. I still feel pretty good about this. Time Twistering me with just 1 land in play feels okay if I can STP that. I do go ahead and play land tax out here because I'd like to get some value off that. We go ahead and tax for the maximum amount of lands here. I believe 2 swamps and 1 plains. Draw into more land, which is unfortunate because we'd rather actually just hit castable cards here. Go ahead and Mind Twist them just to get as many cards out of my hand as I can. Eat a Lightning Bolt here, which is okay because they're kind of spewing value, and my creatures mostly die to Lightning Bolt, so they're losing removal. Them hitting a land here with Strip Mine is actually pretty solid because it means I'm going to be a turn slower to resolve my own threat. So I basically draw and, get another 2/2 that flies. 2/2s that fly pair up very poorly against Curd Ape. I do continue to be able to tax here, so at this point, I have no basic lands left in my deck, but unfortunately, I really haven't drawn anything of significant relevance, despite having, fleeced all of the I guess not dead, but the land cards out of my deck. I actually debate on blocking here, but I don't go for it. I would like to try to double block this thing and see if I can at least knock it off the board. I draw Dust to Dust, which is like hugely punishing here, and it's like, ugh, this is disappointing. I try resolving a Preacher. I'm not going to attempt to double block this thing because they'll probably have a Bolt. So if I leave the Thunder Spirit back, I think it's still going to get through regardless. Although, it could have been more correct just to leave it back for the Factory, but I know I have Disenchant, so I might as well just use the Disenchant to get rid of one of their lands here. I go ahead and resolve a Hippie, draw a Dark Ritual, and I'm pretty disappointed to be drawing that at this point in the game. I do go for the double block here because I don't see myself winning if I do not. They fortunately do not have the removal. I knock out one of their lands and have to pass it back. Now at this point, like a Seer Angel's live, there's a lot of live cards in my deck, so I just opt to block here to salvage my life total. I think that makes the most sense. And I draw into a scrub land. So we kind of miss pretty heavily. I blow up my own Mox there because I don't need more mana, just to take them off of 1 mana. They draw another Curd Ape on their 2, and I draw another Disenchant, so I kind of just draw it dead this one. Given, like, Disenchant's probably not the best, maybe I should have cut more in this matchup. Do I think I boarded poorly? No, I don't think so. I think the board plan was fine. There's just some games you can't win. And then this one right here, like, despite the second game and, like, how I think there was a separate line and how we played that, I actually liked how I played this one. We just drew dead. Despite, having 34 cards left in our deck, we hit lands and we hit disenchant effects that we really didn't have a lot of options for taking out because we're on a black-white deck. What generally tends to beat like the Arabian-style decks, generally not decks that run disenchant. Moat tends to be okay against them, but disenchant effects are generally not that good, but they're still good enough Vice cards like Sylvan Library or just the busted artifact mana that you really can't board them out when you're looking at the board plan in this deck, because this deck can't run the Abyss, so it has to run Moat, the Moat. Unfortunately, like I said, we weren't able to, lock up the right cards, even after land taxing all of the basics out of our deck. And sometimes you just get this. Sometimes aggro just beats through you, and you're not able to kind of transition. But yeah, pretty interesting set of games. My thoughts on DeadGuy Ale. I think the archetype is definitely viable. I think after the first playthrough with this list, though, I would probably like to focus it a bit more. I don't like the Underworld Dreams in it. I think that's maybe more of a sideboard option. But I would like to probably run more Seer Angels in it. I think I'd like to focus more on like just having the flagship 4/4 Vigilance flying threat and exploiting that, because I think that does shore up this matchup significantly for like the Rug decks, because like Rug, other than Psionic Blast, really can't do much against it. The other thing that I'm not a fan of in this deck is that you don't have access to Beb and Reb, and I've found the more I play 93, 94, Beb and Reb are very crucial cards in the format. Like, they're strategically very well placed in this format, specifically Reb. That said, like, my tool that I use to fight this sort of deck and just like the efficient aggro decks in the format is City in a Bottle. So I think going up to 3, like two in the board as opposed to 1 in the board and 1 main is probably right. So excuse me. Those thoughts aside, had a lot of fun playing it. I just think there's probably more gains to be made in the deck itself. But if it's a deck list that interests you, I hope you'll pick it up, tune it, make it your deck, and enjoy playing it. I'm going to show one more series of games here, and this is actually the deck. So before it kicks off, I will run back through my version of the deck for you guys to see. It morphs depending on what rule set I'm playing by. I don't tend to run 4 of Strip Mine, even under EC rules or Eternal Central rules, where you're allowed to, because I think Mishra's Factory is too crucial, and because it's a 5-color deck, I oftentimes don't like having, when I run this 1 Strip Mine, I'll run 4 Mishra's Factories. When I can run more than 1 Strip Mine, I will, because the card is just that powerful, but I also need to have consideration for my mana, so I'll tend to run 3 and 3 Mishra's Factory Strip Mine split. This is the list. It runs a solitary Bolt that could possibly be a solitary Red Elemental Blast, And then it's pretty standard, the deck list. Right now, the numbers that I play with the most tend to be Jaymedae Tome and Disrupting Scepter. The 2-2 split right now belies that I've been playing a lot more control matchups with it. The only deck you really want more than like maybe 2 Disrupting Scepters and 1 Jaymedae Tome against is the deck, is like the mirror match or some sort of control mirror match. That's about it. Like, decks that cannot kill you fast and are looking just to grind card advantage are where you want that. Oftentimes, I'm very happy just running this deck with 1 Jaymedae Tome and 1 Disrupting Scepter, which is, I believe, what I board down to in the matchup you're about to see. But other than that, the only interesting cards in it, Copy Artifact. I think artifacts are just so potent, and like Copy Artifact just ranges. It does a lot of work in so many different matchups, from like copying a Jaymedae Tome in the mirror match to copying a threat just to block a Juggernaut, just to block another Juggernaut or something like that, or a Triskelion. Just very powerful effect. Maybe even artifact mana if you need it. I've actually used it to also copy a Mishra's Factory to ramp myself on the deck, which is an interesting use of it. But the flagship of this deck is the 4 Swords of Plowshares, the 4 Disenchants, the most powerful independent removal spells, backed up by card advantage that's fueled by Jaymedae Tome and power blue cards, and restricted blue cards like Brain Geyser, Balance, But that's kind of how the deck works. You guys have seen this one before, so I'll go through the matchups here, because my opponent has a pretty cool deck as well this time. They're playing, I believe, RG or Ponza. Yeah, I believe it's just RG Ponza. So this hand is not great, but it has a lot of lands, and it has a fireball for removal, and it's got some good, efficient interaction. So I kind of want to see what my opponent's playing, because I feel like the deck is probably the most well-positioned deck in 93-94. I'm a big fan of it. I think it has a lot of... I think it's very match neutral, I guess is what I mean to say. So my opponent is not really doing anything. So at this point, I'm kind of like thinking, all right, like they're probably on some sort of like RG Monsters, quote-unquote, deck. That or Ponza. And what we end up finding out is it's Ponza. So they casted Ice Storm. I say, okay. Like, even if I could counter that, I don't think I do. So it's funny. I'm going to pause it for a second, guys. It's funny because, like, Stone Rains and Ice Storms, like land destruction, actually attacks the deck in a very odd way. The deck I'm playing, like the deck. I don't think the deck cares about land destruction that much because you run so many mana sources. But what it does do is eventually, if and when you need to Time Twister, it actually dilutes your Time Twisters to a significant extent because you'll end up drawing more lands when you do that. So that's kind of how it attacks it, is like very, in my opinion, very asymmetrically, but not per se directly, because like his land destruction spells here are not really inhibiting my ability to cast relevant spells. I still have decent mana because I run so much artifact mana here, so I'm fine accepting land destruction on an every turn basis here. I end up finding a Jaymedae Tome, which I think kind of spells the end for my opponent. I feel very confident that if he doesn't have a Shatter here and I'm able to start drawing off of this thing, I will probably win. He plays an Erhnam Djinn here. I just go ahead and, for efficiency's sake, Swords to Plowshares his Djinn. I go ahead and draw here, hoping to hit a land drop. I miss on my land drop, unfortunately, but I know I don't have a counter spell, and I'm not going to try to feign it. My opponent fissures my land, which is okay. I managed to draw land this time. I go ahead and activate right now. I probably should have waited until their turn, though, just to feign, counter magic or whatever. I get fissured again, and just continue to draw. Find Ancestral Recall, which is obviously never a bad card to find. Go ahead and Ancestral Recall myself. I fireball away the Erhnam Djinn here, and I believe just leave up the disenchant for my opponent's Mishra's Factory, which they're likely to attack with. Well, I guess they were likely to. They're still going to attack with it, but they were likely to anyways because I had a Summoning Sick Mishra's Factory, which means they could attack through it. I go ahead and just strip mine here and draw. Could have played the Soul Ring out, but I'm kind of hoping they'll play another one of these, and I can just say, that's cool, man. Swords to Plowshares. The cool thing about my deck is that it automatically does the same thing to their deck. It dilutes their deck of actual threats. So at this point, we have ensured that if we ever do Time Twister, they're going to be 2 relevant cards short. I go ahead and draw here. I almost make a boo-boo at this point and disenchant their Su-Chi in the middle of their main. I just wait till I go to begin combat so they can't cast another Su-Chi with it and blow it up. As you can tell, I've drawn. I'm starting to hit my land pockets, which is great. I actually do leave up the disenchants here because I kind of want them to attack in here and just blow this thing up. And even though they're RG Ponza, they're at 3 land permanents. I'm at 2. Like, this is feeling pretty good at this point. And I do have the Disrupting Scepter as well if they're on like a burn plan at this point, which it appears they are because they go ahead and throw a lightning bolt at my dome. And I just go ahead and get rid of their last card, which I believe is also a lightning bolt. Yep. And we hold up Counterspell. We miss our draw at this turn with James Day Tome, but I think it's better just to get rid of the last card in their hand because they've been holding it for a while. That Warstone's great. It's one last permanent that if I have to Time Twister will be in my deck. They cast another Lightning Bolt here, so it's like on the mono Lightning Bolt draw, which is interesting. Go ahead and James Day Tome into a Brain Geyser, which is nice. Go ahead and get their last card. I assume it's not the last Lightning Bolt in their deck. It is not. It is a Shivan Dragon, which we jokingly say, it's terrible that I did that. I'm a monster. Because Shivan Dragon, shouldn't have his wings crimped that way, is I believe the language I used. And we find a Balance. That card is absolutely horrible at this point in the game. I believe my opponent very soon thereafter concedes. They go ahead and Stone Rain my threat. It's fine. Eventually I will, get a way to recurse it. Cast another Tome, just so I don't have to discard it. Still leave up counter magic here. Opponent draws land. Cool. Draw Mind Twist. Useless at this point. Draw. Find Bolt. Throw Bolt at them. And they go ahead and just pack it in. I tell them, hey man, I know I'm down by 2.5 minutes, but this is going to get there. Like, you're not going to beat this. Eventually I will Time Twister, get back my Fireball, and find a way to win. Or I'll just wait until I get to the very dregs of my deck and then, build my mana base up and cast a massive Brain Geyser and force them to draw their deck. One of the two, but you're probably not going to break through this right here. So, next game. This hand's great because it has Ancestral, but our opponent has a very, very fast draw. They slam an Erhnam Midrange. I am not a fan of this. I mean, it's a very ballsy play. However, I think it's very risky. I'm pretty sure they're going to be on Red Elemental Blast here. I just feel it. I'm fine exchanging that card for this one right here. They do have it. What I'm kind of hoping to do is kind of set the groundwork to get this the Abyss out and hopefully secure my position from there. I'll go ahead and just slam the Abyss, which will eat their Erhnam, but it's gotten 8 damage out of it, which is pretty good for one card, because they're essentially playing by Philosophy of Fire at this point. They do go ahead and get in there for 2. I believe I go ahead and I cast out this, cast out the Fel Warstone, strip mine them. What I'm trying to do is set up a very big balance turn. Kind of hoping they'll play a threat out here. And they Shatterstorm here, which I have a Blue Elemental Blast to counter, which is nice. And at this point, I believe I DT just for a Mana Source, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And then I go ahead and balance them to get their last card and kill 2 of their lands. Which, from this position, I feel like I probably cannot lose. But you'll find that sometimes top decks happen in this format and in others. Opponent finds land, which is good for them. That's kind of what they need to be doing here, is finding their mana sources. I find a Swords of Plowshares, which is fine. Opponent finds another land. I go ahead and find a Mox Ruby. Not per se great, but I'll play it out here. Opponent finds a Stone Rain. Less good, but okay. I find a Time Twister, and it's possible I should have just cast that there. But I feel like my opponent's live draws are probably less than my own. Now, my hope is that, I'm able to just snipe off this Mishra's Factory. Unfortunately, they regrowth the Stone Rain, which means that I'm going to lose my only colored mana source, and my opponent doesn't have white mana on their side. So my Swords to Plowshares and my Disenchant and my Time Walk and Time Twister are all dead in my hand. So it's possible that I erred, but I think I went on the line of safe here. I think I played a safer line. They end up drawing 2 factories in a row after, a very good sequence of cards to finagle their way out of this. Well, we kind of drew dead to find the mana that we needed. So, Stone Rain did win a game here, but I think it was a fairly lucky draw. I think he would probably admit the same. But it's a thing that can happen, and, if we don't have the mana sources to cast our relevant spells in hand, the deck will lose. It needs its mana, that is for sure. Game 3. So this game actually is very weird as well, because we actually assume an aggressive role with the deck very early in it. Resolve Fell Warstone, get strip mined, go figure, no big deal though. We actually just go for a Time Twister here because we're down to 3 cards, they're still at 6. Feels good to be able to get this fast mana down and kind of just, get our game plan accelerated. Opponent plays a Soul Ring. Fine by me. I'm just going to continue to play lands cards here and just kind of build up my board slowly. I don't really need to rush. Get a Stone Rain here. I just counter it with Blue Elemental Blast. They go ahead and fling a Chain Lightning at me, which kind of surprises me because I'm able to fling it back, which is kind of card disadvantage in a way. Because their card gives me a free card in a way, but I'm not going to really... Well, correction. I am going to try to damage them, but mostly with Mishra's Factories. Seeing the second City of Brass starts giving me an idea that I may be able to actually conduct this line of play where I just life them with factories. Now, they go after my colored mana sources, which is interesting to me because I already have Fell Warstone kind of helping me out. So what I end up doing here, because they did that, is just start firing up my factory and slamming into them after strip mining their only colored source that does not damage them. So they Stone Rain again, and they continue to hit my colored mana sources, which I don't know the rest of their hand, but I think is probably a little risky. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know. But what I do is I think I need to take advantage of their chosen line of play and complement it by putting them on a very aggressive clock with my factories. This is kind of bad news bears because Shatterstorm is going to get rid of 3 of my cards, but I still have a clock on. It's going to hit them for half of their life and essentially, make every tap of the City of Brass a very dubious proposition. They don't do anything here, which makes me very leery, so I go for Strip Mine and blow up their last colored source that can actually help them cast a spell, and hope to hit into another mana source to activate both of these cards simultaneously to avoid like a Lightning Bolt or something like that. They go ahead and shatter, and because they take 2 damage off of that, my other card, which is kind of forcing them to cast through a funnel, a very narrow funnel of mana, is able to hit them because they're not able to deal with both simultaneously despite being on 3 cards. So we put them down to -1. So this was I think turn 10 may be the fastest I've ever won with the deck. It does not win fast. It's probably not true. I probably won with a Fireball very quickly before. I've definitely had opponents concede a lot before turn 10, but... as far as actually taking them to -1 or taking them below 0, very rare. So kind of an interesting set of games between myself and Magic Stronghold. We got to play kind of a timeless classic, the deck against this red-green Ponza deck, which Ponza is not an uncommon theme. I tend to see it in a little more in more 5C. I've seen 5C Ponza. I have seen RG Ponza. I don't think it's the strongest archetype, and we were talking about it. I don't think he believes it to be the strongest archetype either, but it's cool to try new things. And then you also get to see a cool, mid-range DeadGuy Ale that probably requires some more tuning, but has more flexibility, I would say, in its build at the cost of coherence, in an overall metagame, which can lead to some awkward draws where, you just... our third game. Our third game that we played in that matchup was just awkward. It was just all right, Dark Ritual. All right, non-basic lands, Disenchant, Dust to Dust. I'm just like, God, these cards are just not what I need right now. So... 2 pretty cool decks, though, and definitely enjoyed playing against Magic Stronghold. It's possible that in the future, I know he has a partner that run a smaller YouTube site. We may be doing some more videos, possibly on live stream. I don't know, to showcase this great format. If you enjoy wide open metas, then this is a format for you. I recommend trying it. It's obviously a little more pricey to get into, but playing it online is pretty cheap. But the beautiful thing about Old School, really, more so than any other format, is that you can pretty much play whatever you want in it and have a decent chance of winning. There are some very cool archetypes out there. Now, you have some decks that are jank, but are still pretty cool that you can play. But almost everything that is doable in Old School has been emulated in some way, shape, or form over the course of Magic's history. You look at Reanimator. That was a thing. I mean, that was a deck. It was called the Machine. You look at Control. That was the thing for a while. It wasn't the thing initially. It was 2-card Monty essentially with Channel Fireball, and proto decks that had all Black Lotuses and Time Twisters and a Fireball. But then you look at Weissman's invention of the deck and the archetype of Control was holy shit, this is a deck that works, and it doesn't even have threats. It has no creatures. Or maybe it has 1 Seer Angel or something. But the deck won, and all of these different types of decks that we have nowadays really spawn from this set of cards. But what's amazing mostly to me is that, you look at formats like Standard, formats like well, maybe not Modern, but like formats like Standard, like the range of what you can play is so much more limited. Like Reanimator may or may not be a thing in a Standard format. Mid-range may be the only way to play if you want to win, like the only tier 1 way you can play. Control is not dead, but I would say in a lot of ways, aggro control is really true control is probably dead. The last true control deck, I would say, there's been some blue-black versions, but blue-white, when Sphinx's Revelation was a card, maybe blue-black for a while when you had like the Silumgar decks, the Silumgar dot decks. But true control is not really as big in Magic anymore, at least in the standard rotations. I would say mostly what we play nowadays is like aggro control. Maybe closer to control, but aggro control still. Which is how this game played out right here with the Mistress Factory's beatdowns. But you look at the range of what's viable, and like in standard rotations, like you can't play as diverse a set of decks and have as diverse a metagame as you can in 93, 94, which is really what pulls me to it, because the creativity that goes into it, the surprise of just playing a new deck is there almost every time, and it's exhilarating in a lot of ways, because these are the cards that I started playing the game with, and going back to them and revisiting them, it really shows me, like the genius really of these first couple runs, and gives me a lot of appreciation and makes me understand, why it is I fell in love with this game for the elegance that it is, and also really like I think for a lot of folks, like their deck of choice or what they choose to play is a form of self-expression. Maybe it is what draws people to Magic. And having all of the different ways you can play this game be viable, in one very small format like 93, 94, is amazing. And I think there's something there for everyone. And that all said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video set, and take care now.